Okay, good evening, folks. Good to vach, Shvua Tov. And we're on the air again with TorahAnytime.com. The Parsha coming up this week is Vayikrah, not last week's Parsha. And we're on TorahAnytime.com, the greatest medium for distributing video Torah. Now we're going to talk about Purim, because next week we have another opportunity to talk about Purim, but that next week will be, the Thursday will be Tanis Esther, Motzi Shabbat will be Purim, so we have only these two chances to talk about Purim. Now we have the questions of Purim that you can see on the header in TorahAnytime.com. The questions and answers of Purim have been up for weeks already. There are 28, 34 actually questions and answers for Purim. And before we start, I want to be sure that people who listen to me on audio on Kol Halosha know the brand new national number in the United States. Torah Anytime had some trouble. Not Torah Anytime. Kol Haloshan had some trouble with the providers, Cellcom, a global carrier or in Israel, to distribute the shiurim of hundreds of Magidei Shir throughout the world in 9 languages. Yeah, even Kol Haloshan has 9 languages, and artists and Torah Anytime has a few different languages. I know that, French and Hebrew and Yiddish. So I want to give the new number. I'm sure everybody knows it. I hope you do. For Kol Haloshan, you can't hear me. I have 1,775 shiurim on Kol Haloshan every single day for 5 years. The new number to playback Kol Haloshan is brand new number as of last week. 1718 everywhere in the United States. 1718-535-0520. If you dial the other number that ends with 1952, you hear all circuits are busy now, and you might get in because they have 8 lines coming in. This new number has 120 lines coming in. So dial the new number only, 718-535-0520. You can hear the shiurim on telephone, not on radio. Now we go to the questions on Purim. I'm sure you'll love them, because listen to the first question. Where do we see in the Megillah the date the 10 infamous Nazi war criminals were hung, similar to Haman's 10 sons? Question number 1. And question number 2, the Khmelnytsi massacres of 1648, we call that in Hebrew, Gezeras Tach, 408, was 7,408, 7408, 300 years ago. Where do we find the Khmelnytsi massacres of 1648, Tach and Tut, 408 and 409, lasted a year and a half, where 100,000 Polish Jews were killed in 2 years by a gangster that eventually the Polish government caught him and killed him? And where do we see in the Megillah the date of the start of the Second World War, World War II? Let's go to the answer of that right away. Answer number 1. 3 parts to that answer. Right here. The first question was, where do we see in the Megillah Esther the date the 10 infamous Nazi war criminals were hung on one day, right after 1945 and 1946, similar to the Haman's 10 sons who were hung? Haman, Agogi from Amalek, and the Nazis are from Amalek. At the end of the Megillah Esther, it says 3 small letters. When they mention the 10 sons of Haman, 3 of them have small letters. The letters are Tuf, Shin, Zayin. One of the names of the sons has a Tuf in it. It's small letters. and Shin, a small letter, and a Zayin. Well, Tov Shin Zayin is 707. And then it has a long letter for Vayi is also a very long Vav. That represents 6. Vav is 6. 6, 707. That means that 5 in the 6th millennia. It means 5,707. In the year 5707, which is 1946, Nuremberg, Germany, the 10 Nazis were hung. That's hinted to in the Megillah Esther, where the 3 sons of Haman, you look it up, you see 3 of them have 3 small letters, Top, and another word, Shin, and another name, Zayin, and then Vayi is also the last one, has a big Vav. Vav means the 6th millennium. That's like today, we're in the 21st century, but it's 2000. When you're in the 19th century, you're in the 1800s. When you're in the 20th century, you're in 1900s. And you're in the 6th millennium, you're in 5,000. 5,707, 5707 in the Jewish state was 1946 in the English state. That's when they were hung, the 10 Nazis. P.S. Stalin, Yamach Shemo, died on Purim, 1953. And Saddam Hussein was defeated by President George Bush on Purim, 1991. That's the first Bush. Number 2, the Khmelnytsky massacres. Well, this guy, Bogdan Khmelnytsky, in Tach 408, means 5,408, which is 54, now it's 57, 300 years ago, 1648, where 100,000 Polish Jews were killed in 2 years. Where do you find that in the Megillah? You'll see in the Megillah 2 letters that are very large, besides the Vav that we just talked about. Taf and Ches, right in the beginning. Taf and Ches, 408. 5408 was the year 1648, CE, Common Era. And the third thing is the date of the start of the Second World War, World War II. In Megillah Esther, Hey Aleph, I mean chapter Hey, Pasuk Aleph, if you add up the gematrias of the words which have missing letters, and the last chapter, it has a lot of words with missing letters. If you add up the words, the gematrias of the words that have the missing letters, just those words with the missing letters, add them up the way they are, which are Habit, 26, instead of above, Vehabit, missing an Aleph, and Ain, 61, missing a Vav, Ve'ain, and Lo, 31, missing a Vav, and Einam, missing a Vav, and Anachnu, instead of Ve'anachnu, and Ve'noshuv, missing a Vav, for a total of 698. 5698 was 1939. And that's Tov Reish Tzadi Ches, which spells as to date, 1939, which is 698, but it spells Tirtzach, to slaughter. And this is the last Tirtzach, this is actually in Megillah Eicha, not Megillah Esther. Megillah Eicha, if you add up the gematrias of the words which have missing letters, and the last chapter of Eicha is called Zechor Hashem, remember God, what happened to us. That's what the last chapter of Eicha starts. Zechor Hashem Mahoyelanu. It's not from Esther, it's from Megillah Eicha. In Megillah Eicha, Hey Aleph, if you add up the gematrias of the words which have missing letters in the last chapter, Zechor Hashem Mahoyelanu, which is the 5th chapter, you're going to have, so you'll see the words there. If you add up the letters that are missing, the Vavs and all the letters, you're going to come out to 698. Well, 5698 was 1939, beginning of the war. Tirtzach means to slaughter. Tehei Retzach, there'll be a slaughter. Many years of murder. Remember Hashem, what has befallen us. Zechor Hashem Mahoyelanu. That's on Megillah Eicha. All right, next question. What is Purim Katan? What is Shushan Purim Katan? What is Shushan Purim? What is Pesach Sheni? What is Purim Meshuleshes, triple Purim? Purim Katan, as we had last month. The first Purim in the year with 2 Adars. We had last month Adar Rishon. So when it comes to Purim, the 14th, it was Purim Katan. eat a little thing extra. Some people don't say tachnun. It's a mini Purim when you have 2 adors. What is Shushan Purim Katan? The day after Purim Katan. Like we have Purim and Shushan Purim. In Shushan they celebrate on the 15th. Or every city in the world that has a wall around it. In the time of Yeshua, if it had a wall, even though it doesn't have a wall today, if it had a wall in the time of Shushan, of Yeshua, brought the Jews into Eretz Yisrael, and like Yericho had a wall around it, so every city in the world that had a wall around it in the time of Yeshua, even if it doesn't have it today, says it on the 15th. Why? Because Shushan had no wall. And why do you call it Shushan Purim? Because the old city had a wall. And we don't want to make Shushan Habira more special about anything than Yerushalayim. And Yerushalayim had a wall. And therefore, you have to say every city in the world even outside Eretz Yisrael, that has a wall on it when Yeshua had it, when Yeshua came in, and the old city had a wall then, so there every city that is like Yerushalayim, even doesn't have a wall today, you read it on the 15th. Now, isn't that interesting? Every city in the world does that did except one city. Shushan. Shushan did not have a wall. So why do you say that's the only city in the world that didn't have a wall, and you read it on the 15th? The answer is you give cover to Shushan because that's where the nace happened. And you don't want to make a city in the world more prominent than Yerushalayim. That's why whenever you mention Yerushalayim, you always put some letters after the word Yibana, Irenu. Our city should be built up quickly. So the only city in the world where you read it on the 15th that never had a wall at the time of Yeshua is Shushan. But the nace happened there, and you wanted not to give it more cover than Yerushalayim. That's called Shushan Purim. This year we read the Megillah on Sunday, they read it Monday. Because, you know why? Because the Yidden beat up all the Goyim in all the 127 lands, and they gave, and Achashverosh gave an extra day for Shushan, the locals, to destroy them too. So we give cover to and they happened, those Jews got killed in this war. So, we want to remember Shushan, that the nace happened there, a double powerful nace, the second day, that they were given permission to kill their oppressors in Shushan. And by the way, anyone who's listening to me who's an Iranian, a Pharisee, you know what Shushan is today. That's Hamadan. Hamadan is Shushan. That's where Mordechai and Esther are buried. So Purim Katan is the Purim of the month before the second month of Adar. Purim Katan is of the 14th day of Adar Rishon. Shushan Purim Katan is the day after that in Adar Rishon. Shushan Purim is the day in regular Adar, the day after, where Shushan had another battle, killed more Goyim in Shushan. Pesach Sheni had nothing to do with this, but we're talking about Purim Katan, so you talk about Pesach Sheni, the little Purim and the second Pesach. If you were Tamei and you couldn't chef the carbon Pesach on the 14th day of Nisan, you could do it the next month, the 14th day of Iyar. It's called Pesach Sheni. So how come if you couldn't sit in the sukkah on the 15th of Tishrei, why can't you do it the 15th of Cheshvan? If you couldn't light the Hanukkah lights for some reason, 25th of Kislev, why don't you do it on the 25th day of Shvat? You couldn't keep Yom Kippur on the 10th of Tishrei, why don't you do it the next month? If you couldn't, whatever. Why do we have a Pesach Sheni? We don't have a Purim Sheni. Well, we do in a regular year, but Pesach Sheni could come out any year. When there was a carbon Pesach, and you were Tomei, and you couldn't eat it because it takes 7 days to get Tohar from a Tumas Mace, and you were in the Chevra Kadisha, and you took care of somebody 3 days before Pesach. You need 7 days to be Tohar from a mace, and then you can go to mikvah, and then you get the water of Paraduma sprinkled on you, and then you can eat the carbon Pesach. But suppose you missed it, so the next month you have another chance. Why we don't have Yom Kippur Sheni and Sukkot Sheni and Purim and Chanukah Sheni is, you know what? And you know why? Because if you were honest, Rachmana Patra, you were sick, you were in the hospital, Yom Kippur, you couldn't fast. You can't fast next month. Rachmana Patra. If you have a honest, you're in an accident, you're unconscious or in a coma or sick or you were captured by people, you're Patra. You don't have an arm, can't put on film. If you own it, don't know what's going on. You don't have to keep Shabbos. You're insane or something or demented. You don't have to keep Shabbos. So if you don't keep Yom Kippur, so you're potter. If you don't keep Sukkot, because you couldn't sit in the Sukkot, you're potter. And Shavuos, you couldn't celebrate Shavuos or Purim or Chanukah. But you know why only Pesach has Pesach Sheni? Because if you don't do Pesach Rishon, you're Chayiv Koros. The others are not Chayiv Koros. You're potter. Ones Rachmana Patre. If you are an ones forced by some situation, couldn't do it, you're pater. But by Korban Pesach, you only get quarters from doing a negative. That's the only positive mitzvah you get quarters from. You only get quarters from 36 of the 365 negatives. You get quarters for eating dam, boil and nida, eating Yom Kippur, eating chametz on Pesach. There are 36 krisos. But the rest of the 365, there's no koresh. You get malchus, like eating chazer and wearing shatnez. Now, the only mitzvah of the 248 positive where you get punished is Korban Pesach, and there's one more. Bris Milo. If you don't do a bris Milo on yourself when you're over 13, or if your father didn't do it right, or if you're a Baal Tshuva and some guy did it, even if you did it on the 8th day, it's no good. Even if you took off the arla, you still didn't have a bris. And if a Jew did it who's not a Shomer Torah mitzvah, it's meaningless. It's like a guy. And if he did it too early, it's no good. Too late, it could be good if he's a Shomer Torah mitzvah. But you have to have a bris properly done. If there's no arla, you make a toughest dam bris, 3 drops of blood. But you can have it adult. There's moelim that do adults all the time. So they're the only two things of the 248 positive mitzvahs. You don't do a positive mitzvah, you don't do again a veir, you just miss the mitzvah. But for the 365 negatives, you get punished. But there's only 2 exceptions: Korban Pesach and Bris Milah, and that's the 2 bloods they mix together on the night they left Mitzrayim, because the Bris identifies your body as holy. The nation is physically holier than any other nation, not only spiritually. You establish connection with Kalal Yisrael, with your body, and going out of Mitzrayim that night, Korban Pesach, where you ate what they believed in, their God, the Egyptian God was a sheep, you ate it to show you total fearless of any punishment from them. That means you have attached yourself to the Jewish people historically. The Korban Pesach means you eat what they believe in. You roast it, eat it, you smear the blood on the wall. That's about the most dangerous thing you can do, and the Egyptian army were powerless to touch you. In fact, no slave ever escaped from Egypt, except we, 6 million people, walked out on the 15th in the morning. And they were powerless for 7 days until they came running after us, then got took care of them, drowned them all in the Yam Suf. So, 2 of the 248 mitzvahs, if you don't do it, you get kodesh. That's at Korban Pesach and Bris Milah. One is you attach yourself historically with the Jewish people, and one is physically. Okay, now let us go further. Purim Mishuleshes. Purim Mishuleshes means a triple Purim. If Purim comes out for us on Friday, and it comes out in Yerushalayim on the 15th, now 15, what can you do on Yerushalayim the 15th? You can't give shlachmanas. You're not allowed to give matanas on Shabbos. You can't get drunk on Shabbos. What do? You have 3-day Purim, 14th, 15th, and 16th. We only have the 14th. We do everything on the 14th. We eat the Suda early in the day, and we give shlachmanas, matanas, avyonim, we read the Megillah, and everything is 14th. But they have the 15th, so they have triple. They divide it up in Friday, Shabbos, Sunday. What do they do on Friday? What do they do Shabbos? What do they do Sunday? In Yerushalayim, a 3-day Purim, they read the Megillah and Matanis Levyonim on Friday. They read the Megillah, Why can't they do that Shabbos? No, because Shabbos is Yom Menucha. And Megillah, you start banging, and they may, on Purim, you can bang when you hear Haman, and they may crack something or break something or scratch something. You can't do that on Shabbos. So they read the Megillah on Friday, and Matanas Lev Yonim on Friday, because the poor people have to eat. At Adar 14th, they read the Megillah, because 90% of the world reads it on the 14th. On Shabbos 15th of Adar, they say Al Hanisim in the benching and in Shemon Esrei, and Kriyas Parshas Amalek, they read the Kriyas Torah from Amalek. And on Sunday, they send Mishlach Manos everywhere, all around. And we do it all in one day on the 14th. So on what they do in Eretz Yisrael was on Friday, they do Matanos Lev Yonim, poor people need to eat. And they read the Megillah, because most of the world reads it on the 14th. On Shabbos, they say Al Hanisim and read the Kriyas Amalek. And on Sunday, have Shlach Manos. It's called Purim Mishuleshes. It's only for Yerushalayim and all cities that read it on the 15th. What are the 9 major Yomim Tovim and the 12 minor Yomim Tovim? 9 major? I heard of Pesach, Sukkot, Shavuos, and Chanukah, Purim. That's 5. What are the 9 major Yomim Tovim? Major: Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. That's 3. Shmini Atzeres is Yom Tov by itself, because you say Shechianu on that night. That's 4. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, 5, 6. Chanukah Purim, 7, 8. And Rosh Chodesh is a deraisa. You know that Rosh Chodesh is more important than Chanukah Purim? Because you don't keep Rosh Chodesh, you're battling a mitzvah say, and a deraisa, and by Chanukah Purim is only Rabbanan. Minor. Let's look at the minor Yom Tovim. Tu B'Shvat, minor. Tu B'Av, the 15th day of Av, the minor. Purim Katan, the month before Purim. Pesach Sheni, the month after Pesach. Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, where people stop dying. Isru Chag, the day after any Yom Tov. Pesach, Pesach and Sukkot is not Shavuos, because Shavuos only has 1 day. There's no Isru Chag. Only when you have a 7-day Yom Tov, you have Isru Chag. Erev Pesach, that's a very big Yom Tov. You got to be really careful what you do Erev Pesach. Shabbos Chazon, very important day. Chazon, Shabbos Chazon. That's still Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. Shabbos Hagadol, the Shabbos before Pesach. Very important things that are going on then. Special things you say. Shabbos Shuvah, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Very careful what you have to do. Prepare for Yom Tov. Shabbos Shira, you have to read the Shira. Shabbos Nachamu, the Shabbos after your Tisha B'Av. So these are minor Yom Tovim. Number 4. Why is there no Megillah for Chanukah? No Megillah's Chanukah. We have one for Purim. Why is no Megillah's Chanukah? Why is there no Megillah's Chanukah? Why is there no Masechtas Chanukah? We have Megillahs for Purim. It's called Megillah's Esther. We have Masechta for Purim. It's called Masechta Megillah. And we read the Megillah. And we have Masechta Megillah. Why not for Chanukah? There's a Megillah's Esther for Purim in Tanakh, and there's a Masechta Megillah of Purim in the Gemara. Why not for Chanukah? Chanukah occurred after the Tanakh was sealed. It was 200 years into the second base of Mikdash, and the Tanakh was sealed by the last book that was allowed to come in is Megillah's Esther, which was before the second Bayit was built. Once it was built, and the second Bayit lasted 420 years. About 210 years in the middle there was the story of Chanukah and the Chashmonaim. So it was too late to have a Tanakh. Tanakh was sealed. And Megillah's Esther was the last entry in Tanakh. 210 years earlier, at the beginning of the building of the second Bayit. Now, why is there no Masechta? Masechta was, when Shnayos was written 150 years after the second Bayit was destroyed. And the Gemara is 150 years after that. So why is there no Masechta? Rabbi, who is the author of most and the editor of all of the Mishnayos, was from Shevet Yehuda. An editor of the Mishnah was angry with the Chashmonaim, the Kohanim, who cleansed the second Beis HaMikdash from the Greeks, but they returned as years went on, for the first 100 years of the last 200 years of the 400 years, they were nice people. The last 100 years of the last 200 years, the last 100, they became the biggest Rishonim in the world. And even when they were tzaddikim, kedoshim, tahorim, as Rambam calls them, they overpowered the Greeks. They took the kahuna back. And they also took the malchus. And from Levi, you have no right to be a king. King is from Yehuda. So they took it back. They had a right for the first few weeks or months till they established a legitimate melech. But they didn't give it back to the family of Yehuda. They kept it themselves. Rabbi was from Yehuda. He was angry at them. And therefore Rabbi did not include any Mishnayos in the Mishnah. And of course, if there's no Mishnayos, there's no Gemara. And there's only Gemara if you have Mishnayos. Sometimes you have Mishnayos alone without Gemara. But if you have no Mishnayos, there's no Gemara. So he didn't include any Masechta Chanukah, because he was from Yehuda, and that's when the Shevet of Malchus and the Chashmonaim who were from Levi didn't give the Kahuna back, didn't give the Malchus back to Yehuda, and he was angry, therefore he didn't write any Masechta Chanukah. There's only one mention or place in Shabbos, Kuf Chav Aleph, or Chav Aleph, I think it is, about my Chanukah. What is Chanukah? But there's no Masechta. 5. When did Purim occur? When did Chanukah occur? And why did each occur? I'll tell you. When did Purim occur? Purim at the beginning of the second bias, 3408. It lasted till 3828. And the second bias ended in 3828. 1900 and, well, it was destroyed in the year 70. Well, 1970 was 1900 years. And that was 40 years ago, 41 years ago. So that was 1941 years ago, the second bias was destroyed. They defeated the Bnei Haman and Chanukah in the middle of the second bias because of the defeat of the Syrian Greeks. That's when Purim came first, and then Chanukah. And why did each occur? Because Purim, the Yirmiyahu predicted the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, was a young man of 20, and he lived 70 years between the two Beit HaMikdash, Botei Mikdash. He was 90 when he saw the second Beit HaMikdash being built by Koresh, Esther and Achashverosh's son, which really didn't have a son. He didn't really sleep with her. It was just a shade that he slept with. That was an adopted son, and he was a big tzaddik, a guy. He helped build the Beit HaMikdash. Achashverosh stopped it. Koresh continued building it. Then Ezra came along and he built it, and it was not as glorious as the first Beit HaMikdash. Can you name 3 of the 109 other Purims recorded in Jewish history? Purim Zaragoza, Spain. Big nace happened then. Purim Vince. That's called, it happened in Frankfurt, Germany, by a wicked man called Vince. Pulver Purim, the powder, the gunpowder that exploded and blew up a whole town in Danzig in 1803. You want to know about the 109 Purims? Go to the Jewish Encyclopedia. It's Encyclopedia Judaica. You read them all. 109. Go. You can Google it. Different Purims throughout the centuries. What are the 4 mitzvahs of Purim? Kriyas HaMegillah night and day. You know why night and day? Because they fasted night and day for 3 days before Haman was hung. Esther said to Mordechai, "Somu alai, fast with me." 3 days. The horses and cows and sheep and goat all fasted. Not like we fast Beis, Hay, Beis, Bahab. No, continuous 72 hours. Since they fasted night and day, you have to read the Megillah night and day. The 4 mitzvahs. 1 is Kriyas HaMegillah night and day. Number 2, Seudah by day. It includes getting a bit inebriated, not drunk, getting a little high. Getting drunk and stoned is a chilul Hashem. No self-respecting Ben Torah ever got drunk They may act a little high, but they won't speak vile, and they know exactly what they're doing. And then when they hear a baruch, they'll answer it, and they'll get up for a Talmud Chacham walks in. That's not called stoned. That's called a little bit mellow. Chaim adam levesuba bepuria. A man is mechuyev to get mellow in Purim, to feel very good, because a very good thing happened to us. Our people who was to kill us in 127 lands, remember we have no right to bear arms, we were given permission to bear arms and kill our enemies, and the biggest nice happened that the Jews won and they lost. Out of the Megillah says 75,000 Goyim were killed. You know, it's now now Adar. You know they want to kill us in Iran now. You know that? You want to wipe out the state of Israel. You know, Ahmadinejad. Just wait. We got 2 weeks. Let's see what happens to him in Persia, which is Iran. Maybe this is the year. And the other maniac in Libya, he's not going to last long. And these two people go down before Purim. It's a big simon. Meshenichnas Adar, the sign said, Mar ben besimcha. And I told you, if you listen to a Kol Haloshon, I gave an interesting thing why this year could be the year. Because in the morning davening before Baal Shomar, after you say that first Shema Yisrael, the second paragraph on the bottom, it mentions a pasuk from Tzefania. Be'esahi at that time, Kabtzi Eschem, I will gather you. Then it says Eschem again and again 3 times. If you add up Eschem 3 times, it comes out to 1385. That'll be the end of Islam. 1385, that's all years they can exist. Because it started in 628. And you add 1385, it comes to this year. 2011, or in Hebrew, 5771. Maybe, you see the 9 countries are rebelling over there. They're collapsing. Maybe they got a taste of freedom, and they don't want any more domination of a dictator, because Mashiach is also universal freedom of mankind from wrong ideas that they believed in. The wave of freedom and independent thinking is now here. 5771. Maybe this is the year. Kriyas HaMegillah, Suda by day, Matanus Levyonim, and Mishloach Manus Ish Le'ehu to your friend. You can't send it a day before or a day after. Got to be there, not the night of Purim, on the day only. And it got to be something cooked and something baked. So it has to be a challah and a bottle of wine. That's good. Wine is cooked up, distilled, made. You can bring something cooked, fully developed, like an orange and a cookie. I know that's a cheap way to do it. Rather than giving 500 shlach manos, why don't you give 10 very chashiva ones, like a challah and a bottle of wine. This is baked, this is cooked, fully developed. Or meat that's cooked and a challah. Something chashiv, add the little things there, the little things. It got to be at least something baked and something cooked. Shlach monos, you got to send 2 gifts to at least one person. And matanos le'evyonim, you got to give 2 gifts to. You have to give 1 gift to 2 people. You have to give the gift to 2 people. 2 gifts, 1 to each one. Matanos plural, at least 2. You can give 20, 200. Matanos le'evyonim, you have to give 2 gifts to 2 aniyim. And matanos le'evyonim, and shlach monos, Israel. Every mono, every gift has to be 2 things in it. Something baked or something cooked. And now there's a whole industry of shlach monos. Beautiful, and it's wonderful to send hundreds of people if you can afford it. But you know what the Shulchan Aruch says? You have to spend more money on matanos levyonim than shlach monos. What about poor people who don't have a Purim Suda? Isn't it good to invite him to your Suda? Wouldn't that's the matanos levyonim, because you're feeding him. You should have your table of your bar mitzvah and your wedding and your bris and the shevarah, always with strangers, and almondas, yisom, and poor people don't have a family, a husband, a wife, a father. And that's how you makarev people. That's matanos levyonim, invite people to your guests, to your table. So you have to spend more money on matanos levyonim than to your rich friend who doesn't need that gift. But it's a reason to send matanos. It's a very deep reason. Because Haman said to Ahasuerus, they're all spread out. They have machlokas. They have this infighting. They don't agree on anything. They're combative people. They all have different opinions. Now we counteract that by bringing everybody together. Shlach manos ishel re'ehu, and you give everybody tzedakah. Even goyim to stick out your hands. You give them on that day is universal love and affection. Matanos lavyonim, shlach manos, gilus the Esther and the Sudan. Whiskey is not a mitzvah that day, only wine, because she made a suda of wine for Achashverosh and Haman. How is Purim 100% opposite of Chanukah? Purim, we eat the suda, showed the physical continuation of the Jewish people. On Chanukah, there's no meal and mitzvah to eat anything. Chanukah, we light the menorah to show the spiritual continuation of Klal Yisrael. Light, you can't grab light. That's Torah, Shabbat Peh. And the menorah represents the oral law that the Greeks wanted to wipe out. The Greeks wanted to wipe out the oral law and the written law too. You know who wanted to wipe out the written law and the oral law in America? To get rid of Olam Haba, Gan Eden, Schar Ba'onesh, Mashiach, Bris, Shabbos, Tzitzis, Tefillin, Shabbos services on Shabbos. Do you know when to get rid of that? The wicked element of the Jewish people, called the Reform religion, in 1885. Read the Pittsburgh Platform. That's the creed of the Reform religion, and it says there in chapter 2, the Bible is primitive, and in chapter 3, the Talmud is worthless. And we do not consider ourselves a nation anymore, only a religious community. Poison like this, you wouldn't hear from a guy. And now they did Shuvah. 1937, they had the Columbus platform. They went back on all the things they said in 1885. And the critics in the Reform said, 1885, the Pittsburgh platform in Pittsburgh was the original sin of the Reformers. And in Columbus, Ohio, they changed it. And in 1965, they changed it even better. You know why? They didn't believe in Palestine, or resurrection, or Mashiach, or Torah min Hashemayim, or Moshe Rabbeinu, or Bris, or anything. But it seemed to be, and they didn't want a homeland. They said Berlin is the home, is Palestine. You know what they did in 1965 that shows they did Shuvah? 1948, the state was founded. About 1965, I saw a picture of a Reform rabbi with the Amazon and the Talis holding a Sefer Torah and bringing it in with people dancing around for the first Reform kibbutz in Israel. Now, they're holding the Sefer Torah, which they say was primitive. They're wearing a talit, and they're wearing a yarmulke, and they believe in the state of Israel. That's 1965. As you know, today, the last 20 years, it's totally defunct. Don't believe a word when they tell you 1.5 million Reform. They have maybe 1/10 of that actually believe in that stuff. Those are all intermarried. And they have 900 temples. Maybe they have 150 functioning temples in America. You know what kicked them out? MS. People like you and me. Because their system is defunct. It's a lie. And the man that was the head of it, Isaac Meyer, I don't even want to say the word wise, because he wasn't wise. He was very unwise. He was a traitor to his parents' religion. Isaac Meyer, wise, unwise. And in Yiddish it's Weiss. Where he is now is very schwarz, very black. He killed off millions of Jews. Okay, and they knew what they were doing. They came from the Liberal Juden of Germany. That's the reform in Germany, called Liberal Juden. The cancer started in Germany, 1820. All right. How did Esther convince the Chachamim, the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, at the beginning of the second Bayis, to put the Megillah into the Tanakh, after the Tanakh was sealed? Listen to this. The Megillah was written by Ruach HaKodesh, by Esther, as it says in the Megillah, Esther Hamalka, how do I say that? Esther, Bas Avichayil, Kosa, he wrote this Megillah, and Mordechai too. So the Megillah was written by Ruach HaKodesh and has 167 Pesukim. You saw? Listen to this. The only two places in the Chumash that talks about Amalek has 167 words. One is what we're going to read on the Shabbos, the right next 2 weeks before, because Purim is mostly Shabbat. We're going to read it on Shabbos. That's called Parshas Zochar. Zochar she'aseh lecha Amalek, and that's taken from the end of the Torah, Kisei. And the first part we're going to read, we read already in Bashalach when the Jews came out of Mitzrayim. The first Sedra after Pharaoh sent them out of Mitzrayim, and their first Shabbos or the second Shabbos, that Amalek attacked them. Vayav Amalek. Together, these two places in the Torah, and Amalek is from Esau, and Haman is Agag is the son of Amalek, who comes from Esau. These two places have 167 words, and the Megillah has 167 pesukim. That's a simon was min Shemaim. They allowed it to come in the 24th book of Tanakh, and Tanakh was sealed with Megillah's Esther. Number 9. Achashverosh was one of 10 kings who had and will rule the entire world. He was number 6. Can you name the other 9 in chronological order? Achashverosh was one of 10 kings who have and will rule the world. He was number 6. That's 1 of 10. Can you name the other 9? Hashem was the king of the whole world. Nimrod was the king of the world. He was a black man. He threw Avram in a pit. Paro controlled the whole world. Yisrael, after they got out of Mitzrayim, and then they took over the Canaan, the Eretz Canaan, kicked out all those 7 nations, and they were there for 800 or 900 years. Then comes Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian, who destroyed the first Bites. Then came Achashverosh, which is because he married, and Achashverosh married Nebuchadnezzar's granddaughter, Vashti. Then Yavon, Greece. Then Rome. And we're in Golas Roma now. And then comes number 9 is Mashiach. And number 10 is Hashem again. Don't you say in Yigdal every day? V'acharei kichlos hakol, when it's all over, Mashiach and everything, Levado yimloch, he alone will rule. Over what? There's no people, there's no world. Well, before he made a world and the universe, he was a melech. Right in the beginning, B'yom Hashem Yehi Or. Who's he? He made the universe. Before that, there was nothing but black, empty vacuum. Ba'acharei kichlos hakol, and after it's all over, after Mashiach, Levado, he'll rule all alone, nobody around. How can you be a melech if there's no one around? So the last word of that pasuk is no ro. That's a fearful thought for human beings to entertain. How could you be a melech over nothing? Ba'acharei kichlos hakol levado yimloch. No law. Mind blowing. Number 10. Can a person be permitted to cancel or nullify a positive Torah mitzvah publicly for all of Klal Yisrael? Can one publicly violate a negative Torah mitzvah for Klal Yisrael? Esther imposed a horas sha'ah, a temporary injunction, saying fast and do tshuva on my account. She had Ruach HaKodesh. She says God agrees to this. Every Jew, all over the 127 land, fast for 3 days. Erev Pesach, and the first day, and the second day Pesach. That was 3 days. Of course, the second day Pesach, at night, he was humming. Tomo alive, fast for me, she said. She has a right to make a hurrah show, one time only, not to change any law in the Torah permanently, only one, because Hashem said on the night of Pesach, Hashem said you have to eat matzah. The Erev Tochlu matzah, that the Raisa, she canceled that. You can do that to save the Jewish people. Rather break one mitzvah and live on. If you don't break that mitzvah, and you continue not fasting and doing the assimilationist attitude they had, they were going to that party, the plush Persian orgy that took 6 months. You can imagine what's going on over there. They had to do tshuva, otherwise to be gone. Like in Mitzrayim, Hashem told Moshe to tell Bnei Yisrael, they were in 49th level of Tumah. You want to get out of Mitzrayim, you have to make a supreme effort. What is it? Take their God, tie it up for 4 days, a sheep, and tell the guy you're tying it up, He says, but it's a guy that has to go free. You got to run. No. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to kill it. Kill it. And you know what else, Mr. Mitzri? We're going to burn it, roast it. You know what else? We're going to eat it. And you know what else? We're going to take the blood and smear it on the wall. And now what are you going to do about it? That's Gevura. That shows he did tshuva from Avodah Zorah. And then for that reason they were saved. Same thing in Purim. She said, she had communication with Hashem. And obviously it worked. Tzom will I fast for me 3 days. Erev Pesach, Pesach, and the second day Pesach. And I'm going to go to Schwab unannounced. And you know, if you come unannounced, you're ready. You're automatically beheaded. Even your queen. She did it. She took her life in her hands, and he looked at her and he changed he liked her. He said, what is it? She made a party, and then the next party, and both times Haman was there. And Achashverosh, the king, was wondering why is she inviting that guy. Maybe they have something going on between them. And finally, in the second night of Pesach, which is the 15th day of Nisan, because they fasted on the 13th, 14th, and 15th, she said, and she never told Achashverosh what religion she is, where she's born, when she was born, how old is she. She says, me and my nation, if they were supposed to be tortured, I wouldn't say anything. But someone wants to kill us. Someone wants to kill the queen? Yes. Me and my whole nation. Your nation? Which nation? Who is this man? Me who's there? The A there who? She said, he's sitting next to you. Haman. And Haman got red in his face. Because he didn't know that she was the Jew. And she's the queen. And at that moment, Hashem made a nace happen. Eliyahu Navi appeared as one of the kitchen help, stuck his head out of the kitchen and said, King, Haman just came this night and had that. They came 2 nights ago with that pole, that long pole with the noose on it to hang Mordechai. Why don't you hang him? He said, good, hang him up, and he was hung. And their body stayed in good shape for 11 months, because 11 months later they fought the battle on the 13th of Adar, and they defeated 75,000 Goyim there, and they hung the father up with the 10 sons below. That was the 11 B'nai Rishoyim. In 1946, when the Nazis were hung, there was 11 too. One committed suicide the night before. Haman had 11 children beside him. One committed suicide. The woman, she jumped out of the roof or on the window when she saw that the man pulling the wagon below was her father, not Mordechai. She thought the man sitting on the horse, on the white horse with the crown of the king on him and everything, she thought that was her father Haman, and Mordechai, the schlepper, was pulling it. It was just the opposite. She poured toilet water on her father's head. She was so embarrassed she jumped out the window and committed suicide. The night before the 10 Nazis were hung, there were 11. He committed suicide. And when the last one was hung, Streicher, Yamach Shemo, the editor of the paper, the anti-Semitic paper called the Stürmer, before they killed him in Nuremberg, that's where 12 years before, 1933, 1936, Hitler made the Nuremberg laws against the Jews. Terrible racist laws against Jews. 12 years later, they all hung in Nuremberg in the same schoolroom on the noose that the Allies put up there. You know what day it was? No, it was not Purim. It was Hoshana Rabbah. The Allies finished the case and put it off again for a week and a week and a week. Eventually, some of them went to jail for life and some were hung. The 11 were supposed to be hung. One committed suicide the night before. And the last one, who they put the hood over his face before they put the noose around his neck and opened the floor, was Streicher. You know what he said? He looked around and he saw the newspapers, all the New York Times, all over the world. Every newspaper in the world was there. 5 o'clock in the morning. He said, Purim Fest. This is a Purim holiday for Jews. Because he knows on Purim, thousands of years before, 10 B'nai Haman were hung. And now 10 Nazis are hung. Exactly 10 and 10. This is a Purim fest for Jews. They're happy. You know what day it was? Hoshana Rabbah. Yes, so Hoshana Rabbah, it says, is the Yom Hadin for Rishoyim. Tzaddikim are signed up on Rosh Hashanah, and Rishoyim are signed up on Rosh Hashanah. Misa or Chaim. Beinanim, which is 99% of the people, have 10 days till Yom Kippur. Then you can't be a Beinani, you have to be go to bed. And then Hoshana Rabbah, 10 to the 22nd day of Tishrei, 12 days later, the Rishoyim are destroyed. Hoshana Rabbah is Yom Adin Rishoyim. That's when they were hung. That's the Yom Adin for them. But historically, it was like Purim. He knew that Streicher, that Haman's 10th son. He said Purim festival for Yuden. Imagine how Schwab works things out. You just wait. What's going on now in the Middle East and Purim is coming? Just wait. No accidents. You know 9/11 in America? That's Tisha B'Av. We have 9/11 for 2,000 years because Tisha B'Av is the 9th day of the 11th month. First Beis HaMikdash was destroyed 9/11. Second Beis HaMikdash on the same day, Tisha B'Av 9/11. Kristallnacht, November 9th, 11/9. First World War, Tisha B'Av, 1914, 9/11. Second World War is just a continuation of the First World War, if you know about the Treaty of Versailles. And isn't that interesting? When you're in trouble, you have to call 911, 9/11. Does that mean anything? 9 and 1 and 1 is 9 and 1 is 10, 1 and 1 is 11. 11 is 1 and 1 is 2. The entire world history is about two things: us and them, or Hashem and Yisrael, and everything else is background scenery. It's interesting. It says the Esau will get this world and Yaakov will get the world to come. It's interesting. There's only two characters really in this play. It's either Esau and Yisrael, and now it's Yishmael and Yisrael. And their time is up. Remember I told you in the beginning of this year? Okay, I think that's the end of these questions. That was number 10. Can a person be permitted to cancel and nullify a positive Torah mitzvah publicly for Klal Yisrael? We said Esther did it. A Rosh Hashanah, one-time thing. Do fast and do tshuva on my account for 3 days, even though everyone was required to eat by Torah law to eat matzahs, because it says Be'erev Toklu matzahs. That's a deraisa. She mabatel that. This was for the purpose of saving Klal Yisrael. And the second part of 10: can one publicly violate a negative Isser in the Torah for Klal Yisrael? Yes. Eliyahu Novi did it on Har HaKarmel when all the korbanos were only allowed to be brought in Shiloh, and he went up to Carmel, which is Haifa, and he had a showdown between Achav, the wicked Achav, the 8th king in the line of Melech Yisrael, the Rishoyim, and Achav was from Yosef, from Ephraim, and he said, let's have a showdown, because there was no rain for 3 years. He says, if Baal is your God, let make a sacrifice, and he'll send a fire down from heaven. If Hashem is the real God, let him send a fire down from heaven and eat the carbon that they both built the Mizbeach, and they both put meat on it, and wood, and the others were, the 850 others, they were called the VA Habal, or the VA Sheker. They were not Goyim. They were deranged, abnormal, detrader Jews, like Reformed rabbis, who don't believe in Shabbos, or the Torah is primitive and the Talmud is irrelevant. And they don't believe in Mashiach, by the way. They took out from all their prayer books, they call it, they took out Mashiach, or he, as God. They never say he. That's chauvinistic. You have no idea what the cancer of the Jewish people is. Now they're harmless ignoramuses. One guy told me, a certain rabbi, I don't believe in this, and I don't believe in that, I don't believe in that. I said, hello, what's the difference? Let me just open a Chumash. Can you read this Rashi like a third grader could? Couldn't read the Rashi, breaking his teeth. He doesn't know. He got a PhD in rabbinics, whatever that means. He's an ignoramus. He doesn't understand really. Yeah, Jewish history and all that. He doesn't keep the mitzvahs. He may learn his Jewish history, but he doesn't keep the mitzvahs. He's dysfunctional. And by the way, I love them. I teach them in my house. They're wonderful. They're Tinnik Shenishba, and Tzadikim, if they went to the yeshiva. The rabbis are the liars and the traitors who are misleading them. Maybe now the rabbis are ignoramuses too, and they're putted from all of theirs because they're like a shaitan. Anyhow, Eli Hanavi on Har HaKarmel made a mizbeach and brought a carbon, even though one was not allowed to do this when there was a central mizbeach in, it says Yerushalayim, it's a mistake, it's Shiloh. and all private bombers were awesome. But he did this to make a Kiddush Hashem, and he killed 850 Nevi'ah Sheker, so-called deviant Jewish leaders at that time. Look at Melachim Aleph, Yud Ches, chapter 18, Mem, Pasuk Mem. Okay, Rabbi said we are finished. Have a wonderful week this week. Vayikrah. It's all about Karbanos. If you want to learn about Karbanos, go to Kol Haloshim, and you'll see all about the complicated Parshas of Vayikrah. And have a good week. Be good. Shalom, shalom. Chazak, chazak.